Today it's my pleasure to be with Bob Kerr. Hello Bob, how are you?
I'm good. Yourself, Myrddyn?
I'm fine, thank you very much. And it's a little bit of deja vu, isn't it, Bob? Because this is part of a continuing series concerning the Seven Summits.
Yeah, it is. And today we're going to talk about the fourth one from my series of the Seven Summits.
And that fourth mountain is?
It's Carstensz Pyramid in Indonesia. Was the fourth mountain I did in the Seven Summit series.
And the preceding interviews and videos that we've done, Bob, before this one concerning Carstensz Pyramid, where have they been to?
Yeah, the first video was on Kilimanjaro, the highest point in Africa. The second one was on Aconcagua in South America. The third one was on Mount Elbrus, the highest point in Europe, and also sort of bolted onto that was Mont Blanc, the alternative high point in Europe. And today we'll be talking about Carstensz Pyramid, the highest point in the sort of Oceania, Australia region, which some folk debate is that the fourth one of my seven summits, or should I be doing Kosciuszko in Australia instead?
Well, of course, you mentioned then an alternative one for Europe, Elbrus compared to Mont Blanc. And as you quite rightly said, the originators of the Seven Summits Challenge, they didn't go to Carstensz Pyramid, did they?
No, they didn't. Dick Bass and Frank Wells, when they came up with the concept of the Seven Summits, they looked at Australia as being a continent, and they didn't give Carstensz Pyramid a look in at all. So they finished their Seven Summits with a dinner party on top of Kosciuszko. But some other mountaineers, the famous Reinhold Messner, had a closer look at the concept, and Kosciuszko is a bit of a disappointing mountain in terms of mountaineering compared to Carstensz Pyramid. Carstensz Pyramid in Indonesia, that island it's located on is all part of the continental plate that Australia is bounded on. I mean, Kosciuszko is 2,228 metres high, yet Carstensz Pyramid, 4,884 metres high, is significantly higher. And if you're looking at Australia as a continent, why not include New Zealand and Mount Cook? And Mount Cook's, 3,900 odd metres high? So Kosciuszko is quite low in comparison. But the original list of the Seven Summits had Kosciuszko on it, and Messner suggested the alternative Seven Summits.
And of course, one of the good things that you're doing, Bob, just to make sure as you're knocking off each of the highest point on the six continents so far, just one more to go for you, but you are doing the alternatives as well, aren't you?
Yeah, to do the Seven Summits, I'm actually climbing 9 mountains. I think somebody says my maths grades must be poor.
Well, before we go into the detail concerning Carstensz Pyramid, do you want to very briefly talk about the highest point in Australia?
Yeah, Mount Kosciuszko was named after a Polish explorer who was exploring that part of Australia. I went out and nipped up Kosciuszko on the way out to New Zealand. You know, you've been in a plane a long time, you've got to get out the plane, stretch your legs. So in an afternoon I did the 18-kilometre trek round up to the summit, drank some wine at the top. There was some bikini-clad lassies from Guernsey on top, and then I wandered back out, nice and straightforward.
You also encountered quite a few bushfires, didn't you, on the way in?
I had some access issues with Kosciuszko because I decided to drive from Melbourne to Sydney and go up Kosciuszko en route. And in order to get to Kosciuszko, I ended up having to take various diversions. At the time there was, I think it was about 53 bushfires in Australia, in that region, and I took advice from the local fire brigade about how to get into Kosciuszko. There was only about 17 of the fires or something like that under control at the time, and the wildfires just spread rapidly in these areas. So access was a bit of a problem, but once got in there, it was fine. It was a straightforward mountain.
Well, there's a few brief details about your ascent of Kosciuszko. But of course, just north of Australia, and still part of the Australasia continent, there's a fascinating land, isn't there? And quite a large island as well.
Yeah, the main island to the north of Australia is covered by Papua New Guinea on the eastern side of the island, and to the west you've got the far eastern reaches of Indonesia, forming the province of Papua, which previously used to be known as West Papua or Irian or various other names as the politics in this region continually change.
So whereabout is Carstensz Pyramid situated within the western part of the island?
As you look at a map, it's more or less in the centre of the western part of the island. It's a good distance inland, and it's relatively inaccessible for the majority of people.
Now, before we start going into the details of the trip and the preparation to go out to the mountain and also the ascent, it may be quite good, Bob, to lay a little bit of background, a little bit of a few facts about the mountain itself. So how high is it?
Carstensz Pyramid's 4,884 metres high. It's the lowest of the 7 summits. The mountain itself was first climbed by Heinrich Harrer and Philip Temple on the 13th of February 1962 or 63. One of those years. So Everest had been climbed a long time before, and still Carstensz had never been climbed. The mountain was first discovered by a Dutch explorer with the surname of Carstensz, and he'd spotted this snowy mountain from a boat, and it seemed really strange to the Dutch authorities that there was a snowy mountain just 4 degrees south of the equator. So it sparked a lot of interest in the Netherlands at the time. In terms of the mountain itself, it's in a region of the world that very few people get the privilege of visiting, and the tribes and the people around there are quite often described as being Stone Age, not wearing much clothing, walking around with penis gourds, and there's still some people that say there's a bit of cannibalism in the area just to add a bit of spice to it. But in terms of the original ascent by Heinrich Harrer and Philip Temple, it's really interesting if you get time to read their books on the subject. Heinrich Harrer more or less says, nipped out to Carstensz Pyramid, got to the top, great, I'm a wonderful mountaineer. Philip Temple's book, on the other hand, says how he dragged Heinrich Harrer up the mountain whilst Harrer was taking some photographs. So I think Philip Temple really climbed this one. And Philip Temple had been out in the region previously finding the route to get there. It's been quite a hard mountain for anyone to get up. It's really interesting.
Well, even nowadays, Bob, I know that there are organised sort of trips to go out there with guides, but I know through your own experiences what you encountered when you were there, and if you imagine taking yourself back to the early 1960s and having to organise that, must have been incredible.
Yeah, it's quite hard organising expeditions to these parts of the world with cultures that you barely understand, but that's one of the reasons for doing the 7 summits, is to experience different cultures and different ways of life, and you know, it's just travel really enriches your lives.
Well, possibly we'll bring in descriptions of the culture and also the people that you met there when we start talking about your trek in to the mountain. But before that, Bob, if we come to the preparation, when you were sort of based up in the north of Scotland, as you are, how long did it take to organise and prepare for the ascent to Carstensz?
How long did it was really just a continuation from my previous exploits at altitude. It's like, right, I've now done 3 of the 7 summits, and I need to get out, do some more. I'm getting quite into this. So in terms of technical equipment and things, I've pretty much had everything that I need, and just checked with my doctor about vaccinations and things, and get stabbed a few more times for the only travel vaccine I didn't have, which was Japanese bee encephalitis, another rare thing, and get anti-malarial pills. And in general, it was just health fitness I needed to have, and just brushed up on my rock climbing abilities.
So what about the team that did they go out with you, or did you meet them when you flew out?
In the case of Carstensz Pyramid, it was myself with Ashley Howe, who I summited Aconcagua with, and his brother Duncan Howe from Durham. The three of us had talked together and jointly wanted to do Carstensz. The other two people that went out with us was Andy Rice, who we'd never met before, but he was a repeat client for Adventure Peaks in the Lake District. And the fifth person who went out with us was Dave Pritt from Adventure Peaks. Because it's such a interesting country, it was good to have the MD of Adventure Peaks along with us, so he could sort out any monies required if it was needed, just to make sure the trip worked.
So what year are we talking about, Bob, when you went?
Yeah, it was our autumn time of 2008 that I went out to Carstensz Pyramid.
Any specific climbing season, but bearing in mind that it's very close to the equator, isn't it? But
yeah, it's 4 degrees south of the equator. Basically, you can climb Carstensz Pyramid any time of the year, and pretty much at 2 o'clock on the dot every afternoon it rains.
So you've got the team together, and you mentioned, was it Adventure Peaks, the company?
Yeah, Adventure Peaks in the Lake District are one of the few UK companies that have got a good track record of getting people out there and up the mountain. There's a lot of companies that advertise that they can do trips to Carstensz Pyramid, but when you start digging into it, have they actually been there in the last 20 years or so? The mountain itself is in a politically fairly unstable region, and I think we travelled against Foreign and Commonwealth Office advice about travel to the region, because just after we got back from there was another 6 Westerners killed in the region. So I was probably not insured again. In terms of access to the mountain, we had been looking at, should we just do what other people have done in recent years and fly in by helicopter straight to base camp, do the mountain and get out of there on the next available helicopter. And that's the way most folk have been doing it from 2005 through to 2008. The mountain had been closed for over 10 or 15 years prior to that, since there'd been some kidnappings in the region. If you've got time, Daniel Start has written a really interesting book on his experiences in Papua. The book's titled The Open Cage, where him and his expedition was held hostage for a number of months, and some members of another expedition were killed. So it's a really good read if you're going to this region. But for ourselves, we'd wanted the full experience, and the costs of the trip, if we'd been going in by helicopter, the costs were actually rising really rapidly for us at that time, because fuel prices were rising about 33% per day in Indonesia at the time, and so helicopter flights were looking really expensive. So to make the trip go ahead, we asked Adventure Peaks to look at taking us in by fixed wing aircraft to the nearest landing strip and just walk in. Because others a long time in the past had been able to walk in overland. There's 2 main routes in overland. One is from Ilaga to the east of Carstensz Pyramid, which is the way we went in. Some other expeditions in recent years have gone in from Sugapa to the north. And there's been some accounts of other expeditions going in illegally through the mine on the south side, and some of them have been shot at and had all kinds of interesting experiences. But it's our understanding that we were the first expedition in over about 15 years to go in overland from the east, from Ilaga. And we took the same route that Rebecca Stevens did when she did her 7 summits in the late 80s, early 90s.
So where was that route starting from?
It starts from a wee village called Ilaga. It's about 60 kilometres to the east of Carstensz Pyramid. 60 kilometres should be 5 or 6 days walk, shouldn't it? If that. But for us it took a little bit longer because of the locals that we were encountering along the way.
Now, when you mentioned the locals, you're now getting into the native tribes people of that region of Indonesia. And I know through various photographs that I've seen, Bob, it must have been absolutely amazing to sort of meet people like that.
Yeah, it was culturally it was really enriching to go out there. For majority of the young people that we met out there, they'd never seen a white person before. So we had kids running up to us and pinching us. Are they real? Are they real? And there was adults walking around with just penis gourds on, so you're completely naked with a bit of a plant on their private regions, but there was also folk who are sort of in transition from a developing country towards developed world, and they had some had Nike t-shirts on and various other brand names, so it was interesting just sort of seeing the transition in peoples, but they were all very interested in why we were there. And as soon as we landed on a runway that was still under construction in Alaga, there was about 10 metres of tarmac at the end of the runway. The rest was gravel, and there was still the diggers and the road rollers and things at Alaga to tarmac the rest of it. But having arrived there, we headed down into Alaga itself, and we were met by the local police officer, and he checked our permits and had quite a few discussions with our translator that we'd taken in from Jakarta with us, and there was a bit of negotiation to try to get safe passage up to the next village before we headed in towards the mountain.
So did you hire porters to accompany you on the trek in?
We intended, because there was 5 of us from the UK plus translator, we needed to have some porterage support. There's no mules or infrastructure in the area, but it's good to support local economies. So we paid some money to some porters to take us up towards the next village, where our translator said that we would sort out the porterage for getting to the mountain itself. The following day, when we headed up to the next village, Pinapa, we were stopped. Our translator went off, had a few discussions with some guys, and then we were asked to head up to a building and meet some local officials. As part of that process, we had to empty out all our kit bags in front of all the villagers and let them see if there was anything interesting, and then we got taken into an old schoolhouse, sat down, asked a few questions, negotiated access to the mountain a bit further, because although we were in Indonesia, the individuals we were meeting there didn't really recognise Indonesia. They view Papua as being a free province. So we had to have a few discussions with them, and it was a little bit unnerving at times when you see firearms and machetes in the same room as you. But as with Daniel Stark's experience, you need to negotiate and just sort of make sure you get safe passage. But we discussed with these guys about getting access to the mountain, and we organised porters from the village. We were given, I think it was 33 or 34 porters, and we needed to take a village chief along with us to keep them in order, and we also to buy food from the local village for all of our porters. And out in that part of the world, they don't have these lovely freeze-dried food packs that are really lightweight to carry. No, they've got sweet potatoes that we bought from the village. So we had a few tons of sweet potatoes to carry in.
What about the trek itself, Bob? Because you must be going through some wonderful countryside, and also the any sort of animals that you saw, or the fauna and flora that you came across on the trek itself?
Yeah, with the approach route going in from Alaga, you're starting at quite a high altitude. It's about, is it 2,500 metres, something like that? And you're in sort of the upper reaches of the rainforest there. I was surprised how cold it was and how damp. It was just like Scotland, really. And so bashed our way through the forest along sort of known tracks with the porters clearing it a little bit more with their machetes. And eventually, I think it was the second day of trekking after leaving Pinnippa, we came out onto a big open moorland area. And for the next few days, we were basically walking what I could just describe as like through the Rannoch Moor. It was bog all the way with river crossings. So I'm glad we were all wearing our Wellington boots.
And what about the wildlife, Bob? Any interesting animals on the way that you saw?
We actually didn't see any live wildlife when we were out there, which really shocked us. Even the forests were quiet of birds and things.
Yeah.
But we did see an Enchinida, which is a really rare marsupial. I saw that after it had been caught by the Danai villagers, and it was strung up on a bit of string and they were going to cook it for dinner. It smelled gorgeous when they were cooking it and I wanted a bit, but I didn't try it. It wasn't offered, and you don't sort of try to steal off their plates.
So the trek in, you've got the people in your group, as well as the 30-odd local people accompanying you and helping you. Any difficulties on the way with them at all, or not?
In general, it went fairly smoothly with them. It was, in terms of the walking, it was quite hard to actually get them moving every morning because they were a bit cold after the night. And any time that it really threatened rain, they would not walk in the rain. So one day, the furthest we walked was 1.5 kilometres from the previous camp. When you're trying to cover 60 kilometres, that is just ridiculous.
I do sympathise with them, Bob. I know the feeling, I think.
Yeah.
What about arriving at where sort of base camp was set up?
Yeah, I get into base camp after many days of walking across like the Rannoch Moor. We begin to get into the mountainous region, and the route we took joined the route from Sugapa and takes you up to a beautiful lake called Lake Discovery, which was named by Philip Temple because that was the lake which helped him discover the way through to Carstensz Pyramid. So you go up past Lake Discovery, up a steep muddy head wall, and then up over a pass to drop down towards the base camp. This pass is called New Zealand Pass in memory of the New Zealand expedition which had been there previously and hadn't found the way to Carstensz Pyramid. But we managed to find the pass, thankfully, and still wearing our Wellington boots. I think we got up to about 4,400 metres altitude in welly boots before dropping down back to I think it's about 3,900 metres for base camp.
Now, the mountain itself, Bob, you mentioned before that it's the lowest in height of the 7 summits. But when you see photographs of it, it's a very, very impressive mountain, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really impressive mountain. It's just this big lump of limestone that as you come over New Zealand Pass, you're just presented with this sheet wall of rock, and it's like, wow, I have to get up that. And then once you get up the rock face, you've got a very narrow arête to go along, and if you stick to the arête proper, you need to abseil down one section, go across a gap, and then climb about HVS E1 at 4,700 odd metres altitude, and then go up to the top. Or if you're brave enough, you could clip onto a Tyrolean line that's been left in place by previous expeditions and hope it holds. For us, we decided we would use the Tyrolean.
Well, that's obviously the upper section of the mountain, isn't
Yeah.
it? What about setting off from base camp and the route that you took up? And how long did it actually take?
Yeah, it was day 9 of being in Papua that we actually saw the mountain. And day 10 we set off up to climb the mountain, get to the top and back down. So it didn't take us long to do the mountain, and that's why some expeditions can fly into base camp, do the mountain, fly straight out. In terms of the mountain itself, We started off in the dark. I can't remember the time at the moment that we set off, but we basically got a couple of pitches up the rock face before the first light came. It was really important for us that we were as low down the mountain as possible by mid-afternoon to minimise the drenching we'll get from the 2 o'clock rains. So in terms of the mountain, because folk have been accessing it again since 2005, there's a series of fixed lines in place there. But it's really important that the fixed lines get checked before anybody puts any weight on it. The rock there is really sharp, and I was climbing with gloves just to minimise the damage to my hand, and my gloves were completely shredded by the end of the day. Just to illustrate how much damage it does to gloves, it does that to ropes as well that you're clipped into.
Is it good stable rock that you're climbing on?
It was a good stable rock, but there was bits of scree as well in places, but having the confidence of a fixed line was actually really quite nice, and has sort of set me in good stead for future expeditions where there'll be some more fixed lines.
Now, I know you described the summit ridge briefly a couple of minutes ago, but how much exposure, Bob, on the route going up towards the summit ridge?
It was just similar to climbing likes the curved ridge on Buccleuch Moor, just sort of a steep scramble, but with the security of a rope, so we made a pretty good time up the rock face. In terms of technical climbing, probably no more than diff, V-diff, Scottish grades to get up to the summit ridge, and a lot of it was just sort of walking, and we didn't need to rely on the rope too much. It was just a few scrambling sections, and because you had the security of the rope, you didn't feel the exposure quite as much. Now,
you mentioned setting off when it was still dark. Did you have a glorious sunrise, or was it quite murky?
We saw the sun rising over the second highest mountain in Papua, and there was a little bit of cloud cover, but it was just nice to see the sunshine, because you could actually see where you're going and then go, oh right, that's what I'm up for.
Now, of course, reaching the upper part of the mountain and that summit ridge, you were then confronted with a choice, weren't you? So did you abseil, or did you take the Tyrolean traverse?
We decided to take the Tyrolean traverse, so there was 3 or 4 ropes strung across this gap, all of which the outer sheath had some damage. The inner core was exposed on some of the ropes, not knowing how long the ropes had been there for, but we'd said, well, if you clip 3 or 4 of them, it's bound to be okay, isn't it? So we clipped into them all and shimmied across a gaping chasm. Basically there was like 3,000 foot straight down underneath the Tyrolean. If we'd done the abseil onto the narrow neck of rock and then climbed up the E1 HVS route, that was actually to our left hand side, so we were over free space, and it was the most exposed Tyrolean I've ever done.
Well, it sounds very exciting, but it also sounds absolutely horrendous.
Yeah.
I've never done anything like that in my life before, but just the thought of a chasm of about 3,000 foot below, it's at that altitude as well.
Yeah.
It's something to be pondered, really, and how on earth you do these things, Bob, I just do not know.
Well, you just clip into the rope and go hand over hand.
So how far away from the highest point is that traverse?
The Tyrolean traverse is probably less than 100 metres vertically, or maybe slightly more. It's not far away from the summit. And it's a really fascinating summit ridge. It's really rocky and intricate, and we were fortunate enough to still see some snow and ice on the summit ridge. When the original expeditions went into Carstensz Pyramid in the early 1930s, the snow and glacier line was down about 3,500 metres altitude, and there's been really significant glacial retreat in the area. So much so that if you compare the photographs before and now, it's like, where's the glaciers now? They've certainly disappeared, but we managed to summit it with a wee bit of snow, and we were fortunate enough to get to the top with clear skies, and we've got a 360-degree panorama all around us. Whereas I've heard numerous accounts of folks summiting in the clouds and the rain and or the snow, and not really being able to appreciate the mountain. But it was just magical being able to see it all around us. Before saying, right, we have to run back down before the afternoon rains come.
Did all the summit party reach at the top?
Yeah, all 5 of us reached the summit, and we were all very pleased to do so. For Dave Pritt, that was his 2nd or 3rd time to the summit, because he'd flown in by helicopter previously. So it's nice to have a British guide with us who knew the route. And
for him, by the sounds of it, the first time that he trekked into the base of the mountain as well?
Yeah, it was the first time he'd ever gone in on land, and it was just an amazing experience with the local people, just sort of learning their little ways and interacting with them.
Now, the thrill, Bob, that you must have when you get to the summit of these rather high mountains, and especially within the challenge that you set yourself to do the 7 summits, just the thrill of the organisation, the preparation, the months beforehand, going out there, trekking in, climbing up. And just the thought that, before reaching the summit, that on some, you may have to sort of turn around and then come all the way back home and try to repeat it some other time. So the thrill and the exhilaration that you must have when you succeed, that must be tremendous.
Yeah, it's a tremendous emotional feeling when you're successful in one of these. But standing on the top of the mountain, you're only halfway there. You've still got to get back out, and you've got to keep that clear in your mind. I'm on top of a big rocky mountain here. Yeah, it's great being here, but I'm not safe here.
So as far as coming down, did you chase the rains down, or did you get down before they?
We rushed down the mountain. Rushed, but in a safe manner. Abseiled numerous sections, and as we got into base camp, the first spits of rain came, and we were all elated that we beat the rain. I've seen some pictures of the route that we took, and it's like abseiling down a waterfall because all the water is channeled into the main gully. So it would not have been pleasant.
Well, many congratulations, Bob, for getting to the summit of Carstensz. It does sound quite an exhilarating place to visit, let alone climb. But presumably, you trekked out the same way?
Yeah, we trekked back out the same way. Thankfully, we got out quite a lot quicker than we'd gone in. There was less sweet potatoes to carry. But we were also very conscious that we're running out of food because we've taken a lot longer than we'd intended to get out there. And we were trying to push the locals on as far as possible, because we didn't want any vibes of them possibly wanting some fresh white meat.
Well, again, Bob, it's part of the joy of doing these interviews with you is for me just to hear your memories of the places that you have visited and the mountains that you've climbed. So it's been a great joy for me again, Bob. I've learned an awful lot listening to you. But for now, have you any last comments concerning Carstensz Pyramid?
Carstensz Pyramid's a really interesting mountain. If you ever get the opportunity to go out there, accept it. Go with your adventurous instinct, but just bear in mind that it is risky out there, and you will really enjoy the Stone Age culture out there. One thing that struck us, though, as we were coming out from Carstensz Pyramid, was that there is change happening in the region. And when we got back out to Alaga, we met with an Indonesian government official, and he was talking about installing GSM mobile phone networks in Alaga. And it's like, I just then had visions in my mind, a guy walking around with a penis gourd and a mobile phone. So things are going to change. Take the opportunity now to see the place if you get a chance.
Well, Bob, many thanks for your time, and many thanks for detailing your ascent of Carstensz Pyramid. So, Bob Kerr, thanks.
Thanks, Myrddyn.